Marcus Wien was 39 years old, and on the morning of his 11th wedding anniversary, he woke before the sun and made two decisions before his wife stirred beside him. The first decision took 4 minutes. He dressed in the dark, the way he always did when a job required early movement. Boots laced from the bottom, jacket zipped to the collar, keys palmed without a sound. Ed drove 22 minutes to the post office on Albemarle Road, the one that opened at 7. He slid a manila envelope across the counter. Ed paid the certified mail fee in cash. He kept the receipt. The second decision took less than a second. He decided not to say anything about it. That evening, he came home to a dining room table set for one. A handwritten note leaned against the centerpiece, a ceramic bowl he had thrown himself years ago, at a workshop his mother had dragged him to. The note said what it said. Tamara had packed 2 bags. The locks, the note informed him, would be changed on Thursday. She had already spoken to a lawyer. What she believed, what she was counting on, was that the joint account was the sum of everything Marcus Wynn owned. She had been watching that account for 8 months, watching it and planning around it the way you plan around a structure you intend to demolish. It held $6,200. What Tamara had never once thought to ask, in 11 years of marriage, was where Marcus went on the first Saturday of every month, or why his name appeared on no leases, no mortgage, no utility bill they shared, or whose signature was on the return address label of the envelope that was at that exact moment moving through the United States Postal Service toward a law office on East Trade Street. What happened next would cost Tamara everything she thought she had already spent. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light came in low and copper through the windows of the workshop behind the house, the one Marcus had added himself, framing it over a single winter, running the electrical before the drywall went up the way his Uncle Raymond had taught him. It was at the bench by 6:30, a cup of coffee cooling at his left elbow, both hands moving through the familiar work of finish sanding a commissioned credenza. The wood was black walnut, tight-grained and honest. It did not pretend to be anything else. Marcus Wine was a Finnish carpenter by trade and a builder by nature. He had started at 18 as a framing laborer in Charlotte's East Side, learned structure from the ground up, and spent the next 2 decades accumulating a set of skills, the way certain men accumulate character, quietly, without announcing it, until the accumulation was undeniable. He ran his own shop now, Win Millwork and Custom, a 4-person operation out of a converted warehouse on Statesville Avenue. His name was not on the sign. His business partner, a man named Gerald who handled clients and invoicing, was. Marcus preferred it that way. His Uncle Raymond had told him once, standing in a sawdust-covered garage in Gastonia, the man who builds it doesn't always have to stand in front of it. Marcus had been 15. He had not fully understood until much later. Tamara came through the workshop door at 7, dressed for work, coffee in hand. She kissed his cheek, that precise practiced peck that landed 2 inches from the corner of his mouth. She asked if he was planning to make reservations somewhere. He told her he had it handled. She smiled at her phone more than at him on the way out, and he noticed, as he had noticed for several months now, that she carried it face down against her thigh when she passed near him. He had not always noticed these things. He had met Tamara de la Croix 11 years ago at a restoration job on an 1890s Victorian in Plaza Midwood. She was the interior designer, there to take measurements for a consultation. She wore a linen blazer and asked him questions about the original trim profiles, with a genuine curiosity that surprised him. He was not accustomed to being asked questions. It showed her how to read the layers of paint on original millwork to date a renovation. She stayed 2 hours past her appointment. They had dinner that Friday at a Thai restaurant on Commonwealth, and she laughed at something he said with her whole face, unguarded, and he thought, this one is real. For 6 years, she had been real. He still believed that. What had changed in her or in what she saw when she looked at him, he could not say precisely. But change, like rot in structural timber, did not announce itself until the load-bearing moment arrived. He was pressing the coffee to his lips when his phone buzzed, on the bench. Not his personal phone, the other one. The narrow-profile device he kept in his inner jacket pocket. The one Gerald routed the business calls through. The message was from Gerald. 3 words. Call me. Now. A called from the truck, parked in the lot behind the workshop, with the engine running and the heat on low. Gerald's voice was measured, the way it got when he was delivering information he had organized before dialing. It told Marcus that Angie, who handled their books, had flagged something while reconciling the quarter. Two transfers from the operating account, one in March, one in July, totaling $18,400, authorized under a signature that Gerald recognized but had not approved. The transfers went to an account Angie could not identify internally. Gerald had sent the bank statements to Marcus's secure email. Marcus thanked him. He ended the call. He sat with the engine running for 4 minutes. The morning traffic on Statesville moved past the lot entrance in steady, indifferent streams. A was not angry. He was precise, the way a man becomes precise when he recognizes that a thing he suspected has just revealed itself as a thing that is. A opened his secure email on the narrow phone. The statements were there. He studied them for 11 minutes without moving. Then he drove home. Tamara had left for work. The house was quiet in the specific way houses are quiet when the person who usually makes noise in them is gone. A went to the kitchen, opened his laptop at the island counter, and pulled up the joint account. A had not checked it in 3 months. He looked now not for balance. He knew the balance, but for pattern. A scrolled backward through 14 months of transactions, and the pattern announced itself inside of 6 minutes. Small transfers, ranging from $200 to $800, averaging once every 9 or 10 days, always on mornings when his truck was gone from the driveway by 6. The receiving account number was consistent. A wrote it down on a notepad, not typed, written, in the block print of a man who trusts paper over screens when the matter is serious. A cross-referenced the dates against his own calendar. Every transfer aligned with a morning he had a confirmed early job site or delivery. She had been watching his schedule. She had been choosing the mornings she knew she would not be interrupted. $34,200 over 14 months. Deliberate, incremental, careful. His hands did not shake. He opened a new email draft, addressed it to his personal attorney, a woman named Claudette Moreau, who operated a small practice of South Tryon and who had done the business formation documents for Wynn Millwork 3 years ago. He attached the bank statements. He typed 4 sentences. He sent it. Then he photographed the notepad, emailed the photo to the same address, and put the notepad in the inner pocket of his work jacket. He closed the laptop. He stood at the kitchen counter for a moment, looking at the ceramic bowl on the table. The one he had made at the workshop, his mother had pushed him toward the year after his father passed, when she had decided grief required making things with your hands. He had given it to Tamara as a first anniversary gift. She had always kept it on the table. He noted it. He moved on. He opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it simply 11. Claudette Moreau had an office the size of a generous closet and the intellect of a federal appellate judge. She was 61, silver-haired, and had been practicing family and business law in Charlotte for 32 years. She did not flinch at paperwork. She viewed documents the way Marcus viewed structural blueprints, as records of what someone intended, and therefore as evidence of what they actually did. She reviewed his materials the following Tuesday morning, reading in silence for 17 minutes while Marcus sat across from her and watched the pigeons on the ledge outside her window. When she finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "The joint account transfers are actionable," she said, "but they're small. The operating account transfers are more interesting." She asked him 3 questions about the business formation, the account signatories, and Gerald's discovery timeline. She took notes in a precise, narrow hand. "The signature on those operating transfers," she said. "Was it Tamara's on file with the bank?" He told her he did not know. That was why he was here. She told him to give her 72 hours. He thanked her and left. He drove from South Tryon to his Uncle Raymond's house on Beatty's Ford Road, a modest brick ranch with a porch that needed new boards. Marcus had been telling Raymond for 2 years. Raymond had been declining for 2 years, which was a negotiation both men had accepted as ongoing. Raymond was 74 and moved carefully now, but his eyes had lost none of their particular sharpness. He poured 2 glasses of sweet tea without being asked, and settled into his chair with the specific gravity of a man who had been expecting a serious conversation. Marcus told him everything, not as a confession, more the way you describe a structural failure to someone who understands load-bearing. Just the facts in sequence, without decoration. Raymond listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, Raymond was quiet for a long moment, looking at the backyard where a single oak tree had been growing for 40 years, the one Raymond had planted the spring he moved in. She thought she married a man who works with his hands, Raymond said finally. She never bothered to learn what a man who works with his hands actually builds. It turned to Marcus. How long before you move? Marcus told him Claudette needed 72 hours. Raymond nodded. Then you've got time to sit here and drink your tea. It did. For 1 hour, they talked about nothing important. Raymond's sister's grandchildren, a job site Marcus had bid in Belmont, a storm that had taken a branch off the oak the prior winter. And in that hour, Marcus felt something he would later recognize as the last stillness before the necessary work began. The 72 hours produced more than he had expected. Claudette called on Thursday afternoon. Her voice carried the particular crispness of someone who has found what they were looking for. The signature on the operating account transfers did not match the authorized signatories on file. It matched a third party who had been given limited notarized signing authority on a single Nado transaction in 2021. That authority had been granted by Tamara without Gerald's knowledge, buried in an amendment to a document he had not been specifically notified of. The notarization itself was dated on a day Gerald had been out of the office with a documented illness. Claudette had also, through channels she declined to specify over the phone, located the receiving account for both the operating transfers and the joint account withdrawals. It was a personal savings account in the name of a man named Devin Ash, a commercial real estate broker operating out of a Ballantine office park. Devon Ash, Claudette informed him in the same even tone, had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2019 and had been named as a defendant in a civil fraud matter in 2022 that settled out of court. The settlement amount was not public. The fact of it was, she's been moving your money to a man who has a documented history of financial fraud. Claudette said, "You understand what that means for her in terms of exposure." He told her he did. "Good. I'll have the full filing ready by Monday." He thanked her. He put the phone in his jacket pocket. He drove home, parked the truck, walked inside. Tamara was making dinner. He set his jacket on the hook, washed his hands, and sat down at the kitchen table with the same ease he had sat there every evening for 11 years. She talked about a client presentation. He asked the question. She answered it. He passed her the salt when she reached for it. They ate dinner together in the quiet of a house that looked from the outside exactly like what it had always been. Preparation was the work. Everything else was the result of preparation. The certified mail envelope Marcus had mailed on their anniversary morning arrived at Claudette Moreau's office on Wednesday, 2 days before her call. He had sent it the prior Saturday morning not because he had known then what the bank statements would confirm, but because a man who builds for a living learns to sense when a structure is compromised before the failure is visible. He had addressed the envelope to Claudette's attention. Inside was a single page, a handwritten inventory of every significant asset he held outside the marriage. Notarized by a traveling notary, he had called to his shop that Saturday at 6:45 in the morning. The inventory included his ownership stake in Wynn Millwork, 2 investment accounts held in his name prior to the marriage, and the title to the Statesville Avenue warehouse, which Gerald had always handled the leasing agreements on, and which Marcus had purchased quietly in 2019 through an LLC whose name he had chosen on a Tuesday afternoon without particular ceremony. The LLC was named RW Holdings. The R was for Raymond. Tamara had never asked about it. The reckoning did not happen in a restaurant or a courtroom. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, 18 days after the anniversary, in Claudette Moreau's small office on South Tryon. Claudette had arranged the meeting under the guise of a mediation consultation. Tamara arrived with her own attorney, a man named Briggs, who Marcus recognized from the business circuit, a capable practitioner of a certain predictable approach. Tamara was composed. She wore the blue blazer she favored for professional occasions. She had brought, Marcus noticed, a single manila folder. Devon Ash was not present. He had been informed by a separate certified letter, mailed the same morning from the same post office on Albemarle Road, that his involvement in the account transfers had been documented and referred to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit. It had, according to Claudette's contact, declined to attend. Claudette opened the meeting without preamble. She distributed 3 packets, one to Tamara, one to Briggs, one placed face down at the center of the table. She narrated the contents without urgency. The joint account withdrawals, itemized by date. The operating account transfers, with a signature analysis from a certified forensic document examiner. Devonash's financial history, his bankruptcy, the fraud settlement, and his account records showing receipt of the transferred funds. The timeline: 14 months of documented movement. Briggs turned pages without expression. Tamara's expression shifted in the small, incremental way of someone recalibrating, searching for the angle they had not anticipated. "This is circumstantial," Briggs said. Claudette reached for the center packet and turned it face up. "The notarized asset inventory filed with this office on the date of the anniversary," she said, "predates any diverse filing and establishes the premarital and independently acquired assets clearly outside the marital estate." She slid a copy to Briggs, which means the transfers your client initiated were not from marital assets she had standing to move. They were from business operating funds and from her husband's contributed capital, both of which carry criminal exposure, not just civil. Tamara's folder stayed closed. Briggs leaned toward his client. They exchanged 3 words Marcus could not hear. Tamara looked up. For a moment, just a moment, she tried the version of herself that had always worked. The direct gaze, the steadiness, the controlled presentation of a woman who was reasonable and had been wronged and simply wanted what was fair. "Marcus," she said, "we don't have to do this here. We can." His mother's sister, Aunt Dolores, was not in the room. She had been, Marcus reflected later, in the room in the only way that mattered, in the words she had said to him at his mother's repast. 7 years ago, when he was still trying to decide whether to say something to Tamara about the first thing he had noticed. "Baby, when someone shows you who they are the first time, you don't argue with them. You plan accordingly." Claudette set a second document on the table before Tamara could continue. "Your client may also want to review the LLC asset schedule," she said to Briggs, "particularly the warehouse title. I want to make sure there's no confusion about what was and was not part of the marital estate." Briggs looked at the schedule. Then he looked at Tamara. The recalibration completed itself across her face in the space of a few seconds. The warehouse, the investment accounts, RW Holdings. The shape of everything Marcus actually was, as opposed to everything she had assumed he was, came into focus for her in the way of a building seen through fog. First the outline, then the scale. And finally, the understanding of how much you had underestimated it. She did not cry. He respected that, faintly, as an observer respects composure in an opponent. "I think," Briggs said carefully, "my client will want to take these materials and have some time." "Of course," Claudette said. She was already closing her folder. "My client's terms are in the final packet. The response window is 14 days. Marcos stood. He gathered his jacket from the back of the chair and settled it across his arm. He looked at Tamara once, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the particular neutrality of a craftsman who has finished a piece of work and stepped back to assess it. "I don't need anything from this room," he said. "Everything I built to last." He walked out. The door closed behind him without a sound. 8 months passed the way a Charlotte winter passes. Quickly, gray at the edges, and then, without announcement, replaced by something warmer. Marcos had moved, in November, into a house on a half-acre lot in the Belmont neighborhood he had been watching for 2 years, a 1940s craftsman, with good bones, bad windows, and a kitchen that needed to be taken down to the studs. It took the kitchen down himself, over 3 weekends, with Gerald on the second weekend and Raymond on the third. He put it back up the way it should have been from the beginning. New walnut cabinetry Emiled himself. Dovetail drawer boxes, unlacquered brass hardware that would patina out honestly over time. He planted a Japanese maple in the backyard in February, in the cold, the way his mother had always said you should plant things you intended to keep. Wien Millwork had expanded in January. They brought on a 5th person, a young woman named Kezia, freshly certified, who asked better questions than anyone Marcus had hired in a decade. The Statesville warehouse had a second tenant now, a frame shop that paid on time and kept their space immaculate. The operating account was solvent and audited quarterly by a firm Claudette had recommended. Gerald had put his name on the front sign, finally, after Marcus suggested it mildly, twice over the course of a year. He had met Renee Hollis the previous October at a continuing education seminar on sustainable lumber sourcing that he attended every year and that almost no one else ever attended. She was a landscape architect. She asked him a specific question about white oak stability and outdoor applications and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. They had dinner 2 weeks later at a place she chose in Noda, and she talked about her work with the specificity of someone who thought about it seriously even when she was not being paid to. She laughed at her own mistakes more readily than most people he had known. She did not perform for him. By March, she had keys to the Belmont house. She had not asked for them. He had cut a set and left them on her kitchen counter one morning, without ceremony, and she had put them on her keyring that afternoon, without making it a conversation which he had found to be exactly right. He heard about Tamara through a mutual acquaintance, a woman named Sonia, who had known them both since before the marriage and who delivered information the way people deliver things they feel obligated to pass along without wanting to be the carrier. Tamara had settled. The terms were what they were. Devon Ash had entered a deferred prosecution agreement with the DA's office, which had required him to close his brokerage license voluntarily as a condition of the arrangement. It had relocated to Columbia, South Carolina. Tamara was living in a one-bedroom apartment in the University City area, working in project coordination at a mid-sized property management company. At Industry Network, the interior design community she had built her professional identity within, had gone quiet on her in the particular way professional communities go quiet when a story has circulated, and no one wants to be adjacent to it. Her mother had not spoken to her since February. Marcus registered this information the way he registered most things, attentively, briefly, and without residue. He did not gloat. He did not revisit it. He mentioned none of it to Renee. Some things did not require carrying forward. On the first warm Saturday in April, it was on the back porch of the Belmont house, coffee in hand, watching the Japanese maple put out its first growth of the season. The small, careful leaves, the color of old wine, reaching toward light the way new things do when the ground has finally thawed and the conditions are right. Renee was inside. He could hear her moving through the kitchen. She had learned her way around without being taught. The morning was still and particular in the way that certain mornings are. When a man is standing exactly where he built himself to stand. He had mailed one envelope on the morning she left. It had not needed to mail another. Some things, he thought, were worth the patience to build right. He hoped you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.